Welcome to Herron-Morton Place, one of Indianapolis's great historic neighborhoods. We're beginning our journey at the south edge of the district, right by Herron High School at 16th and Pennsylvania Street, the perfect gateway for our tour. It's hard to believe, but this quiet, tree-lined area just north of downtown once hosted roaring state fairs, a Civil War military camp, and decades of change before becoming the charming neighborhood we see today. The very name Herron-Morton hints at its story. Herron for an art lover who helped build a cultural landmark here, and Morton for a wartime governor who turned these grounds into a Union Army camp. Over roughly 160 years, this patch of the city has been farmland, fairground, war ground, an upscale suburb, a community in decline, and finally a thriving historic district with a creative spirit. As we set off on foot, imagine peeling back the layers of time beneath the streets and houses, from marshy woods where early pioneers picnicked, to bustling fair midways with carnival attractions, to fashionable Victorian avenues and beyond. Don't worry, we'll bring it all to life for you as we go. And since this is a nice long stroll, we'll cover some miles on foot, we'll keep things engaging. Expect a mix of history, architecture, a few fun facts, and maybe a quip or two along the way. So put on your walking shoes and let's explore Herron-Morton Place, where Indianapolis's past and present meet on every corner. Our tour begins in front of Herron High School, a stately brick building with tall columns and a grand facade, a fitting introduction to the neighborhood's artistic legacy. It wasn't always a high school. In fact, it started life in 1906 as the John Herron Art Institute, one of the city's first art museums and art schools. The building's Italian Renaissance Revival style, designed by the famed local firm Vonnegut and Bone, hints at that cultural pedigree. You might imagine gentlemen in frock coats and ladies in Edwardian gowns attending art classes or strolling these halls over a century ago. The Art Institute itself was born from a significant act of philanthropy. In 1895, a local art patron named John Herron left a bequest of $200,000, worth many millions today, to establish a museum and art school here in Indianapolis. By 1902, the school opened in a converted mansion on this site, initially using the old Tinker family home. That house was soon replaced by the grand Beaux-Arts-style building we see now. Famed Hoosier group painters like T.C. Steele, William Forsythe, and Otto Stark were early instructors, fostering a creative spirit that remains part of the neighborhood's identity. In the 1920s, a new wing, with its distinctive red brick and limestone trim, was added by architect Paul Philippe Crête, further expanding the campus. The art school thrived here for decades until moving to a new location in 2005. Rather than let these handsome historic buildings sit empty, community leaders helped transform them into Herron-Morton High School, a classical liberal arts public charter that opened in 2006. So, if you pass by on a weekday, you'll now see students heading to class, not art museum goers, but the creative energy of this place continues. It's a great example of how Herron-Morton's past is repurposed to serve the present. And as a bonus fun fact, renowned Impressionist painter T.C. Steele actually worked right here in the 1880s when this was still the Tinker House. Hopefully none of his paint splatter is still on the floors. 1825, North Pennsylvania. Mick Wallace home. As we move just north along Pennsylvania Street, this home at 1825 North Pennsylvania offers a slightly different chapter in the Herron-Morton story. Built in 1896, this residence is often described as reflecting early craftsman influences, which were just beginning to appear in American architecture at the end of the Victorian era. Compared to the grander homes we'll see deeper into the neighborhood, this one feels a bit more grounded, less about show and more about function. And that shift reflects something happening in Indianapolis at the time. By the late 1800s, people were starting to move away from the highly decorative Victorian style towards something simpler and more practical. Now, what's fascinating is where this house sits in the timeline. When it was built, the state fairgrounds had only recently relocated in 1891, and the neighborhood was still finding its identity. This home represents that early transition, the moment when this area stopped being fairgrounds and started becoming a place where people actually lived, raised families, and built community. And you have to imagine that at the time, this location felt just far enough removed from downtown to be peaceful, but still close enough to stay connected. Essentially, it was suburban living just before suburbs existed. It also serves as a reminder that not every house in Herron-Morton was a mansion owned by a political figure or industrialist. Many were homes like this, solid, well-built, and designed for everyday life. And honestly, if these walls could talk, they'd probably have fewer ballroom stories and more kids tracking mud in after playing outside, which, in a neighborhood like this, is just as important to the story. Now let's head a couple blocks east to Delaware Street and make our way north. As we stroll up the 18th and 1900 blocks of North Delaware, take in the impressive display of late 19th century residential architecture. These blocks are lined with Queen Anne-style homes, large, ornate Victorian houses built mostly in the 1880s and 1890s when this area boomed as an upper-class enclave. Picture gaslit parlors and horse-drawn carriages pulling up to these stately front porches. Tall trees arch overhead, and you might notice most houses sit well back from the street, some with broad lawns or gardens. Originally, Delaware Street, like Alabama and New Jersey streets here, even featured a landscaped esplanade, a grassy median strip down the center, enhancing the park-like feel of the neighborhood. The esplanades on Delaware and Alabama were removed in the 1920s to make way for automobiles. Progress has its price, but the spacious feel remains. As you walk, notice the variety in design: gables, turrets, bay windows, decorative shingles, and wraparound porches, all hallmarks of Queen Anne architecture, which emphasized ornate detail and eclectic features. This area was developed in the 1890s, right after the state fairgrounds relocated, as wealthy residents flocked to build their dream homes on these newly plowed lots of Morton Place. Developers Willard Hubbard, Edward Claypool, and Elijah Martindale envisioned a refined neighborhood beyond the city's crowded core, and they delivered. Delaware Street became one of the city's most prestigious addresses, home to politicians, business magnates, and artists alike. Today, it remains a showcase of Gilded Age architecture. And if you find your jaw dropping while gazing up at these multi-story beauties, don't worry, that's a common reaction. Consider this part of the tour a neck exercise in Victorian splendor. The Barnhill Gatch House, 1933 North Delaware Street. This elegant brick home at 1933 North Delaware Street, built in 1909, is a standout example of early 20th century architecture in Herron-Morton Place. Its design has a restrained Federal Revival or Colonial Revival style. Notice the balanced facade, the classical porch columns, and the decorative pediment over the dormer window on the roof. It's quite a contrast to the fussier, gingerbread-clad Victorians nearby. The first owner was Dr. John Barnhill, a physician who also dabbled in historical novels. Perhaps he was inspired by living surrounded by so much history. But the most fascinating story here might be about the home's second owner. In 1922, Barnhill sold the house to Dr. William S. Gatch, who happened to be the dean of Indiana University's medical school. Dr. Gatch is credited with inventing the adjustable hospital bed, the kind that raises and lowers patients. So, if you've ever enjoyed breakfast in bed at a hospital or pressed that magical button to sit up and watch TV, you can partly thank a former Herron-Morton resident. The Gatch family lived in this house into the 1960s, even as the neighborhood changed around them. Today, the Barnhill Gatch House stands beautifully restored, a testament of its craftsmanship of its era. Check out the elaborate door surround as you pass by. It's one of those details that reward a closer look. A home like this reminds us that beyond the grand facades and architectural jargon are the personal stories, doctors, teachers, artists who gave this neighborhood its rich character, and in this case, a better night's sleep for hospital patients everywhere.
Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. I hope you still want me, I hope you still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground. Let's leave for an eternity. We'll sail across the lights beyond the sky. I'll be with you eternally. I'm an addict for your love. It keeps me high, keeps me high. Keeps me high. Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. I hope you still want me, I hope you still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground. Let's leave for an eternity. We'll sail across the lights beyond
The Grand Queen Anne Mansion, 2050 North Delaware Street. Just up the block, the house at 2050 North Delaware Street is another showstopper. Built around 1897, it's a sprawling Queen Anne-style mansion that embodies the opulence of Herron-Morton's heyday. This home is enormous, 6 bedrooms and multiple levels, practically a castle by urban standards. At the turn of the 20th century, such a residence would have been occupied by a prominent family, perhaps with live-in servants, and possibly a horse stable or carriage house out back. Architecturally, note the asymmetrical shape, likely with a corner tower or expansive bay windows, and probably some ornate woodwork in the gables, all typical of Queen Anne design. If you're able to catch a glimpse of the roofline, you might see a spindlework porch or a patterned brick chimney. Houses like this one were built to impress, inside and out. Over the years, some of these mansions were converted into apartments or rooming houses as the neighborhood went through mid-century decline. You might even notice extra doors or odd exterior stairs on a few older houses as evidence of those conversions. Fortunately, many like number 2050 have since been lovingly restored to single-family homes, often by architectural enthusiasts drawn to Herron-Morton's timeless charm. If walls could talk, this place would probably have some great turn-of-the-century dinner party gossip to share. Instead, we'll settle for admiring its imposing presence and imagining a gilded carriage pulling up to that front door over a century ago. Truly a glimpse into Indianapolis's millionaires' row of the 1890s. Talbott Street Theater, Neighborhood Nightlife and LGBTQ+ Legacy, 2143 North Talbott Street. In the southwestern side of the neighborhood, here we find an old building at 2143 North Talbott Street with a rather colorful past. It was originally built as a neighborhood movie house in the 1920s, known as the Talbott Street Theater. In the early days, local families might have come here by streetcar to catch the latest silent films or vaudeville acts. Fast forward to more recent history, the building reinvented itself as a nightclub, simply called Talbott Street. From 2002 until 2016, this venue became one of Indianapolis's most legendary LGBTQ+ clubs. What was once a vintage movie theater turned into a vibrant performance space, hosting drag shows and dance parties that drew crowds from across the city. The club's rainbow-lit sign and flamboyant weekend lines were a far cry from its quiet residential surroundings, but they symbolized Herron-Morton's tradition of embracing the arts and diversity. In fact, long before it became a historic district, this neighborhood was a haven for LGBTQ culture, even during decades when such safe spaces were rare. Back in the 80s, just a block away, the 21 Club was a well-known gay bar, and before that, a certain stately house on Central Avenue quietly served as Club Betty K, one of the city's earliest lesbian bars, starting in the 1960s. These stories of nightlife and community tell us something important. Herron-Morton wasn't just a collection of pretty old houses. It was a place where people found freedom to express themselves. That spirit continues today. Even after Talbott Street nightclub's closing, you can still feel an aura of creativity and inclusion in the air, a reminder that a strong neighborhood is about the people and culture as much as the bricks and mortar. We've strolled into a quieter part of the neighborhood now, but it hides a dramatic past. Here, near 19th and Talbott Street, we are standing on what was once the Indiana State Fairgrounds in the late 19th century. The State Fair moved to this very spot in 1859, when all of this was just the edge of town. For 3 decades, crowds flocked here every fall for agricultural exhibits and carnival attractions. Imagine the sounds of livestock, carnival barkers, and maybe an early Ferris wheel all echoing where these homes now stand. But the most intense chapter came with the Civil War. In 1861, Governor Oliver P. Morton commandeered the fairgrounds as a military induction center to train Union soldiers. A year later, after the Battle of Fort Donelson, the site was hastily converted into Camp Morton, a prisoner of war camp for Confederate soldiers. At its peak, thousands of POWs were confined here in improvised barracks and tents guarded by Union troops. Conditions were notoriously harsh. Just try to picture a barbed wire stockade in the midst of what's now a tranquil residential block. It's a startling contrast. By the war's end in 1865, Camp Morton was closed, and eventually the fair packed up for a new location in 1890. The neighborhood that rose in its place even took on the governor's name, Morton Place. Today, you might find a historical marker nearby to commemorate Camp Morton, but otherwise, the only rebels you'll see here might be the squirrels raiding someone's bird feeder. It's incredible to consider how a place can transform, truly a phoenix-like rebirth from one era to the next. As we move further down Talbott Street and arrive near 1810 North Talbott, you begin to feel the transition happening more clearly. This part of the neighborhood illustrates a key moment in Herron-Morton's timeline, when the grand vision of Morton Place settled into reality. These homes, often built in the late 1800s or early 1900s, weren't just architectural experiments, they were investments in a neighborhood that was still proving itself. Talbott Street itself is significant because it cuts right through what used to be the Fairgrounds landscape. In fact, much of the land stretching from 19th up toward 22nd and across to Central Avenue was once filled with exhibition halls, barns, and open grounds during the State Fair era. So standing here, you're essentially in that overlap, not quite the original Fairgrounds core, but not fully removed from it either. Architecturally, homes along this section often show a mix of influences. Some lean toward the decorative Victorian forms, while others begin showing simpler lines, reflecting evolving tastes. And if you're paying attention as you walk, you'll notice something subtle. The spacing, the rhythm, the setbacks. Nothing feels accidental. Even though the fairgrounds were turned into residential lots relatively quickly, there was still intention behind how this neighborhood was shaped. It wasn't just a place to live, it was designed to feel like a place people wanted to live. Now here at 1627 North Talbott, we're firmly in the classic architectural heart of Herron-Morton. Built in 1893, this home is a textbook example of Queen Anne architecture, one of the defining styles of the neighborhood's golden era. Queen Anne is often misunderstood. Despite the name, it has almost nothing to do with Queen Anne herself. Instead, it's all about visual interest. Look closely and you'll start to see the pattern. Asymmetrical design, bay windows, varying textures, and often decorative trim that feels almost playful. These homes were built to stand out, not to blend in. And that makes sense because this was a time when Indianapolis was growing rapidly. Wealthy residents moving into neighborhoods like this weren't just building houses, they were building identity. What's also interesting is how these homes have lasted. Many went through decades of conversion into apartments during the mid-20th century decline. Some were neglected, a few were nearly lost entirely. But houses like this survived, and today they're often restored back to their original glory. You could say this home has lived a few different lives, which, fittingly, makes it a perfect symbol of the neighborhood itself. We're now at the heart of North New Jersey Street and the last esplanades, 1900 to 2000 block of North New Jersey Street. We've now reached the picturesque portion of New Jersey Street, which offers one of the best scenes in Herron-Morton Place. As we walk up the 1900 to 2000 block, you'll notice a long, grassy median. This is an original esplanade, a formal landscaped island that once graced multiple streets here. New Jersey Street is special because it still has this feature intact. It's like a window back to 1890, when Morton Place was first laid out. This broad, tree-lined median creates a park-like boulevard, exactly as the neighborhood's designers intended for their upscale development. Strolling here, imagine ladies with parasols and gentlemen in bowler hats enjoying an afternoon walk along this very esplanade over a century ago. Flanking the median are more grand homes. We'll visit 2045 North New Jersey Street shortly, noting that it is a Tudor revival house built in 1897. Its steeply pitched roof and decorative half-timbering are straight out of Shakespeare's England, or at least Indiana's interpretation of it. On the right, a bit further up, stands 2065 North New Jersey, a Queen Anne from 1900, likely boasting the asymmetrical shape and ornate woodwork of that style. The juxtaposition is delightful. Tudor versus Queen Anne, each with its distinct flair, facing each other across the green esplanade like friendly neighbors from different worlds. New Jersey Street really captures the grace of historic urban planning. Wide streets with shared green space, encouraging neighbors to meander and meet. It also means a built-in play area for dogs and kids, much appreciated today. If you're here on a sunny day, you might even find a few residents out gardening or relaxing under these old trees. It's a serene reminder that city living at the turn of the 20th century was meant to be as much about community and leisure as it was about houses. Here at 2045 North New Jersey Street, we're looking at a home built in 1897, designed in the Tudor Revival style. And it's one of the clearest examples of how architectural tastes in Herron-Morton began to shift at the turn of the century. Up to this point, much of the neighborhood leaned heavily into the ornate, decorative world of Queen Anne design. But homes like this start to tell a different story, one influenced by medieval English architecture, with steep roof lines, narrow windows, and a sense of solidity over showmanship. There's something about Tudor homes that feels grounded, less about impressing from a distance, more about creating a sense of permanence. And in a neighborhood that had just transitioned from fairgrounds and wartime use into residential life, that idea of stability mattered. It's also a reminder that Herron-Morton wasn't built all at once, it evolved. And standing here, you can almost see that transition happening, one house at a time. Just across the way at 2065 North New Jersey Street, built around 1900, we step right back into the world of Queen Anne architecture. And it's a perfect counterpoint to what we just saw. Where the Tudor home felt grounded and restrained, this one leans into variety and visual movement. Queen Anne homes like this often feature asymmetrical forms, projecting bays, decorative trim, and a mix of textures that keep your eye moving across the structure. There's a sense of personality here, almost like every part of the house wanted a say in how it looked. And that contrast, right here on the same street, is what makes Herron-Morton so compelling. Within just a few steps, you can move between two completely different architectural philosophies, one rooted in tradition, the other in expression. It's not uniform, but somehow it all works. Now we briefly venture along Central Avenue, the eastern boundary of Herron-Morton Place. The character here differs a bit. Central is a wider street, and historically it had more institutional buildings and churches, giving it a less residential feel in spots. One notable landmark was Club Betty Kay, which in the 1960s operated in an old Victorian house around 1808 Central Avenue as one of the city's first lesbian bars, a brave enterprise in an era of limited acceptance. Today, Central is quieter and a mix of old and new. Some historic homes and structures remain, while other lots opened up over time. This is a good place to talk about what happened to Herron-Morton in the mid-20th century. After 1930, as new suburbs sprang up farther north, many well-to-do families left for newer neighborhoods. Big homes here were often carved into apartments or slipped into neglect as maintenance costs soared. You might notice a few structures that still show signs of that period, perhaps lacking the polish of their renovated neighbors. By the 1960s and early 70s, a significant number of houses had been lost to demolition or fire, and empty lots pockmarked the area. Standing on Central, away from the most grandiose homes, you can almost sense how close Herron-Morton came to fading away entirely. But this isn't where our story ends, because even as some houses crumbled, a new generation saw hope amid the old brick and wood. As the neighborhood's future seemed bleak, the seeds of revival were already planted. In 1956, students from the nearby art school organized the first Talbott Street Art Fair between 16th and 20th. It was a modest neighborhood event then. Today, it's a huge annual tradition each summer that draws over 60,000 visitors, transforming these streets into a bustling open-air gallery of art and local culture. Meanwhile, by the 1970s, urban pioneers, including some of those same art school graduates, began buying and restoring the dilapidated houses, refusing to let the neighborhood's beauty and history slip away. They formed the Herron-Morton Place Association in 1976, set up a historic preservation district in the 1980s, and worked tirelessly to promote reinvestment and community spirit. A great symbol of this resurgence is the local theater. Remember the old Civic Theater building at 19th and Alabama, which opened in 1925? After the Civic Theater moved out in the early 70s, volunteers established footlight musicals in that space in 1974, keeping live theater thriving in the neighborhood. Today, footlight musicals, in what's now called the Headback Theater, is still going strong, staging musicals and plays with local talent. It just goes to show, the arts, which were part of Herron-Morton's DNA from the beginning, played a big role in its comeback. Residents also reclaimed empty lots and created community gardens and a park on Alabama Street, which now hosts events like a popular Oktoberfest and summer concerts. By the turn of the 21st century, Herron-Morton Place cemented its status as one of Indy's great comeback stories, a place that not only survived, but thrived through the passion of its community. We'll conclude our tour along Alabama Street, another showcase of the handsome homes and a sense of community pride. Stretching both north and south, Alabama Street is lined with beautifully restored historic residences. Some, like the Queen Anne homes at 2050 and 2055 North Alabama, boast turrets and wraparound porches that harken back to the 1890s, while others reflect the early 20th century styles that followed. This block also features a small neighborhood park where residents gather for picnics, playdates, and events. Herron-Morton is known for its convivial front porch culture. Their tongue-in-cheek slogan boasts, "Porching since 1875," so it's not unusual to see friendly waves and hear laughter from porches as you pass by. In many ways, this neighborhood is a microcosm of Indianapolis history. It rose in prosperity, weathered hard times, and reinvented itself through community spirit. From a marshy picnic grove to a bustling fairground, from Civil War upheaval to a Gilded Age oasis, through decline and back to vibrancy, all these layers live on beneath the sidewalks we've traversed today. As we finish our walk, take one last look at the ornate gables, the leafy streets, and maybe a neighbor enjoying the afternoon on a porch swing. Herron-Morton Place isn't simply a time capsule, it's a living community that honors its past while embracing the present. It has truly been a phoenix among neighborhoods, a place that rebuilt itself from the ashes of history into something enduring and delightful. Thank you for joining this walking tour on Georgia Street Live, and I hope you've enjoyed discovering the many stories of Herron-Morton Place as much as I've enjoyed sharing them. Safe travels and happy exploring. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this.